This may sound crazy to you. This may sound crazy to a lot of people too, but this is what happened to me. It's been 5 years since I haven't spoken about this, but now is the time to say it. I won't give you my real name, since I don't want any publicity from anyone, not even my friends or the people involved. The last thing I need is a bombardment of visits at our doors from the public, government agencies, or even the paparazzi. Nor would I want some poor soul who coincidentally shares the same real name as me, to end up dealing with said bullshit. So for now, just call me Paul. No other names, nor last names. Just Paul. I also won't provide details of where we specifically went. Trust me, I wouldn't want it happening to you, assuming whatever they are still over there. This all started back in 2017. I was hanging out one time with a group of friends, and we were planning to do an investigation in an abandoned ghost town. After hearing stories about the place, and the tragedies and deaths that happened there, it could make sense why it's haunted. I assume the spirits of those who worked and lived there haven't gotten any proper burials or places to rest. So we believed we could get some paranormal evidence, and perhaps captured footage of ghosts or spirits, maybe even learn about them and their tragic fates. Of course, I wasn't much of a big believer at the time. But I suppose that this hunt for ghosts could help prove to me that they're in fact real. After 2 long hours of driving, we reached the location. The place sure looked scary as hell at night. It certainly did look like a haunted ghost town, not just literally haunted. I opened the trunk, and we got all of our ghost hunting gear, 3 outdoor cameras, 3 EVP recorders, 1 EMF recorder, 2 spirit boxes, 3 walkie-talkies, and last but strangely, an Ouija board. One of my friends suggested we do an Ouija session in case we don't get much evidence. That night, we certainly did get evidence, but from my own traumatic experience, we caught another paranormal event. One that will forever scar me for the rest of my life. After 2 long hours of gathering evidence, I decided to use one of the spirit boxes outside. Our 3 cameras were set up, pointing in specific areas where there's said to be hotspots for ghost activity. For some reason, I had the spirit box on, while I was on my way to one of the hotspots. Not one of the cameras pointed to where I was at, when it happened. As I exited the door out of one of the abandoned houses, the sky was clear and I could see the stars. But as I looked down for what was only a few brief moments, I caught something on the spirit box that drove a chill down my spine. There were these 2 words that appeared on the spirit box. Up. Sky. For some reason, this gave just 2 words, but they were crystal clear. I could even hear it. Out of all the other sounds I heard, a lot of them produced static or were disembodied. But this one, you could hear it with clarity. In fact, it even sounded mechanical. I was awestruck for a few moments, before I recalled the 2 words that came from it. That's when I looked up, and I was rendered speechless. For one moment, the sky was clear and the stars were completely visible. Then the next moment, upon looking up again, there was this craft hovering what looked like at least up to 30 feet above me. This thing was big. From my guess, I'd say it was about 20 meters in diameter. But what unnerved me the most was that this thing produced no sounds. As to what it looked like, the best description I can give you is that this craft was the shape of an equilateral triangle. It was white in color, and the edges were glowing a bluish-purple light. This freaked me out a lot, but I couldn't scream or anything. I was too fascinated with what I was looking at. None of my friends were outside to see this event. Worst of all, I didn't have a walkie-talkie to tell them about it. All I took with me was the spirit box, along with my cell phone. As I wanted to try and scream for help, flashes of purple light began emitting from the craft's edges, becoming even brighter. This caught my attention and stopped me from screaming. Just then, I was about to call my cell phone, when I noticed that it had no service where we were at, and my spirit box wouldn't do any help for me, other than catching disembodied voices. After observing this huge craft carefully, it started emitting a purple glow around its surface, like some kind of outline. I was about to take a picture, or at least get a recording of the event, when the glow on the craft started to get brighter. As it got brighter and brighter, I suddenly felt dizzy. After a few moments of dizziness, I passed out. I didn't remember anything at first after passing out, but I did recall being at the location. But instead, upon waking up, I found myself back home. I then recalled doing an investigation with my friends, but not much else after that, before waking up back in my apartment. As I wanted to get answers as to what happened, I called my cell phone. I was thankful to see that it had service this time. After getting in contact with one of my friends, I asked him what happened while we were investigating. However, he was shocked to hear from me again. "Dude, where have you been, man? Where the fuck were you at the haunted area? We were looking for you." We even called the police to see if they could help find you. I was shocked by this. I then asked what happened to me, and told him that I'm back in my apartment. You've been gone for about 2 weeks, bro. How the fuck did you get back to your apartment? Did you have someone take you there? The police couldn't even find you in there. Neither could we. As my friend began explaining, I felt this burning sensation in my forearm. As I looked at it, suddenly, this image came into my mind. It was an image of what looked like a long, thin tube, injected into my forearm. But I couldn't remember anything else after that. Whatever happened, it left 3 puncture wounds in a triangular shape. Wait. What happened to me? Didn't you guys take me back or something? No, bro. You weren't even at the location. We didn't take you back. What the fuck? I asked myself. Hang on, bro. I'll get a hold of the others. We're coming to see you. My friend told me before hanging up. I sat down on my couch, waiting for my friends to arrive. After a few minutes of waiting, I felt an itch on my head and I was about to scratch it, when something felt off. My head was usually shaved, with faded dark hair. But this time, I felt like I had long growing hair. So I went to look in the mirror, and I noticed that I had hair on my head. Not only on my head, but also my mustache and beard had grown. I was surprised. Was I really gone for about 2 weeks? I've always shaved my head and my face every morning. The fact that I'm seeing a 2-week growth of head and facial hair is astonishing, since I cannot recall what just happened to me. A knock on my door occurred, and I was overjoyed, thinking my friends are finally here. My joy then turned to fright when I opened the door to 2 police officers. One of the officers got a good look at my face and immediately recognized me. Paul? I confirmed it was me, and I told them I thought they were my friends. We have been investigating on your whereabouts for a few days, until you were declared missing and the case was left unsolved. Just then, we received a call from a neighbor, explaining to us that someone might have broken into your apartment. Good to see you're still in one piece, but it doesn't explain the disappearing act that occurred regarding you. Could you tell us what happened? I don't know, sir. I was cut off by the burning sensation on my forearm once again. One of the officers looked at it, and began asking how I got. Having no explanation how I got there, as well as my last visit to the doctor being 2 months ago before this occurred, one of the officers suggests that I head over to the hospital to get an examination. I told them that my friends will be arriving shortly, and that I'll have one of them take me to it. The police agreed to this, and I was allowed to wait for my friends. I was astounded to see my friends pull up as the cops were about to leave. Well, there they are. The policeman said. 3 of my friends got up, shouting at me, asking where I was the whole time. One of them got a close look at me, and started to walk backwards. Guys, does he look alright to you? He asked the others. I don't know. Why? I asked. You look pale, dude. Other than that beard and mustache you got going on there, I don't remember your skin color being whiter than mine, he said with a mix of laughter and confusion. That's why, like I said, it's best to head to the hospital to get an examination. The policeman said, then I nodded in agreement. I went into my friend's car, and he followed the police to the hospital. While he was driving, another one of my friends began to ask questions, more specifically where I was all this time. I couldn't explain what happened, since I couldn't recall. One of my other friends, sitting closest to me, then said the following. The only thing you left behind was that spirit box outside the house. It didn't say much about where you went, other than up. Sky. On the screen, and that was it. Up. Sky. After hearing these 2 words from his mouth, another image came to my mind, and I recalled seeing those words on the spirit box, along with this huge white craft emitting a purple glow, before it faded away. I started to become anxious. One of my friends looked at me with confusion and worry. Are you okay, bro? He asked. I don't know. I saw this craft in my mind, and it had this purple color around it. But I don't know, I said to him. One of my friends held back a laughter, but I could hear that faint chuckle, since he was sitting next to me. Did you get abducted by aliens? He jokingly asked. I wasn't happy to hear that, but for some reason, this dreadful feeling hit me after hearing that. It's as if my gut instinct was trying to tell me something. I was taken into the examination room, and one of the doctors took a few samples of blood, to see if I was on any sort of medication or illegal drugs. The results came back negative, indicating I didn't have any drugs in my system. I then pointed to the puncture wound on my forearm. The doctor was able to get a good look at it, but was interested to see that this puncture wound came from something, but it wasn't of any medical equipment that could leave a mark like this on my forearm. After a long hour of going through the examination process, I was let go with the results coming back negative that I was not on any drugs, but also with the fact the puncture wound had no explanation. Well then, let us hope you get some rest. Try not to disappear again this time, alright? We have to go. Good to see you are still here with us, alive and kicking even. We were suspecting your friends may have killed you or something. We may see each other again, but for now, best of luck. The officer said before he and his fellow officer left the hospital. Well, that's depressing. We come to the hospital to see if we could get anything on him, and we turn up with nothing. One of my friends said. As I walked out with them to the exit, I noticed a young girl playing with a toy in her hand. It looked like a wand with a star on the top, and she was making noises as if she was using her imagination to play with that toy. It seemed harmless at first, joyful even. That was until her toy emitted a purple glow in the star. After looking at that glow, I suddenly saw an image of the craft, but it wasn't just the craft. I was seeing purple lights everywhere, and there were these 4 tall figures emitting a purple glow around them. I saw a glimpse of one of these figures emitting an even brighter glow around its hand as it proceeded to touch the top of my head, right before the images faded once again. I suddenly fell onto the floor, leaving one of my friends shocked at the ordeal, along with a young girl whom I suddenly got her attention upon falling. Bro, what happened? Is everything alright? My friend asked. I got up, and told him about the image once again. Frustrated with this, one of my friends suggested we find a way to what's making me see these images. Maybe some kind of therapist or hypnotherapist can help. One friend chimed in. Well, that last one interested me, but also made me wish I didn't see one, a hypnotherapist. To me, it just sounded far-fetched. To think that a hypnotherapist could help sounded ridiculous to me, but there was no other explanation for these images plaguing my mind when regarding certain situations. We were lucky to find out that the hypnotherapist who works in our town was actually present inside of the hospital due to his son having been injured in a motorcycle accident. We wouldn't have known it if one of my friends didn't, out of mere stupidity, ask a receptionist for any well-known hypnotherapist nearby. She mentioned that she knows of a man who does that, and is currently in this building. Sadly, due to visitation rules, we weren't allowed to see him. So we decided to just wait it out, until he arrives from the room. After 2 long hours of waiting, along with eating snacks one of my friends picked up from a convenience store nearest to the hospital, he came out of the elevator, with his son who was shockingly intact. He only had a fractured hand, but he was okay for the most part. Excuse me, sir. Can you help us out? One of our friends here is having these weird images affecting his mind. Are you able to help him as soon as possible? The hypnotherapist looked at me, and his eyes went wide. You were the guy that was missing for 2 weeks. How are you doing, Paul? He asked. I told him that I'm fine, but I told him everything going on with me, how I can't remember what happened in my disappearance, and unable to explain all these images hitting my mind when I see something in particular. I can't help right now at this time, but I'm able to schedule you for tomorrow at noon if that's okay, he said. I agreed to this, and he gave me his phone number and address. We all headed back home, with my friend dropping me off. During the night, I shaved off all of my hair and I took a shower to get ready for tomorrow. After finishing my shower, I walked into my room to get ready for the next day. Just as I finished changing and was about to make dinner, when I noticed my alarm clock. The alarm showed that it was about 7:30 at night, but that wasn't what caught my attention. The orange glow it gave off made me recall images of seeing the spirit box giving off that same screen color, as well as looking up at that craft. The image didn't fade away quickly like most others. This one stayed firmly until I eventually passed out. I was seeing this craft emit that same purple glow, and it caused me to become dizzy and faint even in reality. I ended up falling onto the ground. I woke up again. When I stood up, I felt a throbbing pain in my head. I understood this was because I collapsed and fell onto the ground with my head hitting the ground. But when I looked at the alarm clock, and it showed 12:15 at noon, I realized I was late for my appointment, so I rushed outside to my car, only to see my car was missing. None of my friends brought it back? What the hell? Then a sudden realization hit me. I went into the pocket of one of my clothes I wore during my time investigating, and I grabbed the keys I left in my pocket. I guess they couldn't bring it with them since I had the keys on me, and I'd been gone. This made things worse for me. I had no way of getting to his office. I pulled out the card he gave for his contact information, and I called to see if he was at his office. But there was no answer. Great. Just fucking great, I said out loudly. Are you okay, Paul? One of my neighbors asked. After telling him everything, He was nice enough to give me a ride to the place and drop me off there. After being dropped off, I went to open the door to see if he was still in there, but it was locked. I also couldn't call my neighbor, since he was far away to even hear me. So I sat on a nearby bench, thinking about my situation. After what felt like a few minutes, I saw the hypnotherapist pull up in his car. He got out while holding a McDonald's bag and a drink in his hand. "Out to lunch, I see," I said in a joking manner. "Well, you haven't come in on time, so I thought you must have forgotten and I decided to grab some lunch." He told me, "I wouldn't be here if I forgot. Sorry I'm late. I didn't have the transportation to get to you." I told him. "Did you eat?" he asked, and I told him I didn't. As we went in, he gave me half of his quarter-pounder sandwich and half of his fries, so I could eat. After eating, I was told to rest for a few minutes to relax my stomach before we begin the process. I didn't mind this at first, and I texted my friends to see if one of them would be able to pick up my car at the location, and told them where I hid my car keys. One of them agreed, since I didn't want to go there, out of fear that something might happen to me again. Shortly after a few minutes, I was called in by the hypnotherapist to begin. I walked into a room. It felt cold, given that there was an AC in it. There was also a nice, small flatbed, and he instructed me to lay down on it. As he began the process, he asked me a few questions, before beginning the hypno-regression therapy. As he caused the coin to move left and right of my vision, I suddenly recalled everything in my mind while at the same time, felt like I was in a state of blackout. Everything was dark at first, but my vision suddenly became brightened and I was met with this very bright color hitting my eyes. I partially covered my eyes, waiting for it to adjust. Even though it took a while, it eventually adjusted. But sadly, my movement wasn't any better. I couldn't feel or move my legs and I could hardly move my arms. After a few moments, I became aware of something in my forearm. My vision was a bit blurry, but I could see there was this long, thin tube injected in. I took it out with what strength I had, and I could see 3 needles at the end of it. As soon as I pulled it out, this sharp stinging pain affected my forearm and I became aware of it. I ended up covering it with my other arm, hoping it could ease the pain a bit. As I slowly became more aware, I realized I was inside a room, all alone. I thought my friends took me to a hospital, but this hospital didn't look right. It looked very high-tech in appearance, and I became aware that I was laying on a table. In time, my vision became fully clear, and I could make out this very strange environment I was in. I didn't know where I was in at first. I noticed there was a door there, so I walked towards it. The door immediately opened up in an instant, with the door shooting up, causing me to become shocked. I didn't expect a door to do something like that. As soon as I walked through the opening, the door then closed at the same speed that it opened. Very high-tech, I thought, still thinking this was a hospital. I looked around to see if anyone was there. Nothing. The only thing I could see were these doors that looked like the one I came through, as well as these bright, bluish-purple lights emanating from what I presumed to be the ceiling. Everything was white, however, with the lights being the exception, and this entire place appeared to be mechanical. I also had this feeling, something wasn't right. It's as if something is trying to tell me, this is not a hospital. As I made my way through what looked like a hallway, I came upon the last door in the center of what looked like a dead end. I decided to go through that center door, and I was met with an astonishing sight. The area I walked into was massive, and I could see these strange, but interesting crafts that looked like something you would find in any science fiction movie. After looking at the crafts hanging above, I became aware of movements all around in the distance. As I looked at them, there appeared to be figures, all walking around. They all looked normal at first, but then I noticed they all look alike, and they seemed to be sporting the same type of uniform or clothing. From what I could see, it kind of looked like military uniform, but heavily armored looking. They even looked like they were very tall. I assumed they were clones. I became aware of the sounds of talking several feet away from me, followed by hearing footsteps, approaching behind to my left. I turned to look and see if it was one of those figures. Instead, to my horror, I saw something I wish I hadn't turned to look at. This thing didn't resemble any of the figures I was looking at. This thing looked like a lizard, with beige skin, and yellow eyes, and it was at my height. I freaked out, but didn't scream, as there were 2 more figures that were lizard-like in appearance as this one looking at me as well while the other was talking to an entity I thought was human at first, and I didn't want to get the third lizard's attention at first. This human-looking entity had a bald head, olive skin color, and was muscular. It was a human, or so I thought. Nevertheless, I foolishly called to it, despite my better judgment, and then it turned. It wasn't a human, the moment I saw its face. This entity sported 3 completely red eyes, the third eye being on its forehead, and it was looking at me. It pointed at me, and it was yelling very loud in a language I didn't understand. That's when I turned to look at the clone-like figures, and I see them all looking at my direction. Out of fear and terror, I ran as fast as I could. The two lizard beings began pursuing me at a relaxed pace, while the third one and the muscular figure just stood there, watching me. I ran to one of the nearest doors away from my pursuers, and I was thankful to be met with another empty walkway. I ran through the walkway as fast as I could. Just as I was running, another door opened in the distance. There were 3 tall figures walking out from the door, and it walked toward my location. When I got close enough, I got a good look at their faces. They looked reptilian in appearance, with dragon-like faces, white skin with purple eyes, and they were all looking right at me. I ran the other way, only to see that there were the 2 lizard-like beings pursuing me as well. I went through one of the doors in the walkway, only to see it was almost like the other room I came out of, the only difference being equipment of some kind. The dragon-faced beings walked into the room, followed by the lizard-like beings. One of the dragon beings blocked the only doorway I could escape them. I was trapped in the room, moving around to get away from the pursuing entities. I was screaming in fear and terror, as I tried my best to avoid them until I eventually became tired. I was eventually backed into a corner, and my face became wet with tears as one of the dragon beings pulled its arm out to grab a hold of me. I closed my eyes, screaming and crying, thinking of what might happen to me next. Instead, I felt nothing. I cautiously opened my eyes, to see what had happened. I could see the hand of that being, close to my arm, but I saw its face, as well as the faces of the others, looking at what appeared to be a bright purple orb, floating next to the dragon being's head. I couldn't tell at first, but I felt as if something was communicating to them. Shortly after the orb disappeared, the beings then looked at me, causing me to freak out, in a heart-pounding manner. The dragon being that proceeded to grab me, then gave me a smile. It terrified me at first, until it stood up and turned to walk through the door, away from me. I got up, hesitant at first, thinking they would come back for me. So I waited for a few moments, with belief they were far away enough for me to run. I went to the door for it to open, and I peeked, only to see they were distant now, their backs facing me. I went in the opposite direction, in attempts to get as much distance as I can from those things. I eventually came across another center door at a dead end. I reluctantly walked close to it, thinking I might see another massive place with more of them. As I walked close enough to the door, it opened. But instead of a massive place, I saw what looked like a small break room, or what resembled a break room. There appeared to be tables, as well as chairs. In the room, appeared small cabinet-like structures. I walked up to one of the cabinets, and there were these small cylindrical containers, with a bright, purple light in them. Strangely, I grabbed one, and it felt extremely light at first. Is this some kind of liquid substance, or some kind of light? I asked myself. After a few moments of looking around, even at the containers, the door to this room suddenly opened, and I was met with 3 different figures this time. I didn't feel worried at first, because these entities looked human from a close distance. I realized that these 3 figures looked just like the ones I saw in the area from the distance. They looked exactly alike and were wearing the same militaristic uniform. Clones, I thought of them. I thought I was safe, but as I got closer and got a good look at them, something was off. While they all had faded black hair, along with what appeared to be a medium skin tone, the eye color didn't match any color I've seen out of people. I remember watching Helix on Sci-Fi before, and was familiar with those silvery eyes of those immortals as they were called in the series. If you have watched the series and seen their eyes, you get a very good idea of the eye color of these clone-like beings. It looked a lot like that. Not to mention the height of these beings, which appeared to be 8 feet tall. I was hesitant to speak at first, but I wasn't terrified of them. I tried asking them where I was and how I'm able to get back home. They didn't respond. One of them had its eyes glowing that familiar purple color. Just then, it grabbed hold of me. I tried to grab its arm off, but I realized I couldn't move it. It felt like I was being grabbed by a statue. This clone had a very powerful grip, and I couldn't break out of it. It then walked out of the room, taking me with it, and I was forced to walk with it else I'd be dragged out, with the 2 other clone-like figures following behind. After passing a few doors, the room we went in looked like the one I came out of upon waking up, and this entity was taking me to the flat table. I realized I was going to be put back to sleep, and this made me horrified. I tried resisting, doing whatever I can to get out of its grip, to no avail. Just then, one of the clone-like entities pulled out its hand and started emitting a purple energy, surrounding its hand. It then placed its hand on my head, and that's when I suddenly felt like I was about to faint, before passing out. After that, It was the end. That was the last experience I had, before I woke up to my relief, to see that I'm on the flatbed in the hypnotherapist's office. He told me that even though I was in some sort of comatose state, my body began to react, causing me to become drenched in sweat and tears. I suppose to his shock, that such magnitude of horrors I had experienced being wherever I was in, encountering those figures at first, even those dragon-like beings, could exist in someone. Shortly after, I noticed out the window that my friend were outside and heading to the building, hoping to see if I'm okay. Upon coming out of the room, my friend saw me and noticed that I had been sweating and crying. I don't know what had happened to this young man, but it wasn't pleasant. The hypnotherapist told him without any explanation. While I explained that I'm okay, just remembering all of that made me horrified that just ghost hunting even at night is a big fuck no. Now, I'm too afraid to even look up in the stars, at the night, thinking they might come back for me again. After telling this experience to all of my friends about what happened to me and what was revealed, they said nothing. But at least we all got our answer to my disappearance, let alone mine, but at my expense. I was never the same Paul ever again, after having remembered all of that. Now, I refuse to go to the store or anywhere else with my friends at night. Sometimes I look in the mirror, thinking those things are right behind me, only to met with nothing but a basket of dirty clothes. You can forget about seeing ufologists or people who are interested in alien abduction cases. I don't want the attention, because it might expect me to recall every horrifying moment of that event. I try my best to shun it away, to force myself to forget all that had happened to me in that event. After 3 years had passed, things started to get better. I suppose at this point, I forgot about the whole ordeal, and I was happily living my life in peace. Sadly, I haven't been in touch with my friends often as I used to be. 2 of my friends had families of their own, so they couldn't hang out much since they have kids to take care of. The other 2 went into college off-state, so I couldn't see them. I'm glad to see they're all doing fine, nevertheless. As for me, my life situation has been improving. As soon as night came, I was about to head to the grocery store to grab food to prepare for tomorrow's dinner, when something caught my attention. Next to my car, I saw this device. It looked awfully familiar. As soon as I picked it up and got a good look at it, I immediately recognized what it was. It emitted that same orange glow, and gave out the same 2 words I once picked up on it. That's when everything came back to me, the events that once haunted me. I suddenly felt dread, as I looked up, only to see this huge craft hovering above me, once again.